Lately, I've been reading a lot of older forum posts from the start of Friendship is Magic, and maybe the most surprising thing I've noticed is just how sensitive some fans were towards the division of screen time in the early series. These handfuls of archived posts are almost the only place I notice people getting concerned with how many episodes or lines each individual character is getting. And I get that. I'm the first person I know to get hyperfixated on something and get concerned when the focus is being taken off the people I care about in favor of someone I'm not too wild about. But it also got me thinking about whether there was a way to scientifically analyze who got the heft of the focus over the course of the series. Maybe not in terms of screen time, since Lyra Heartstrings appears in a good majority of crowd shots, but I wouldn't exactly call that being in focus. But what if I could rank the cast by word count? That's a pretty concrete metric, and it wouldn't be too terribly difficult to quantify. There are two different methods I could have used to calculate this, and I'm giving you both since they each come with their own unique set of pros and cons. The first way is to give you a ranked list of all 228 characters who speak at least 100 words over the course of the series, ranked exclusively by number of words spoken. For that, I reached out to a computer science guru I met on Fiverr. He wrote me a program that takes transcripts of television episodes and formats them into a broken down Excel sheet containing the speaker and the accompanying line of dialogue. I gave him a text file containing all 9 seasons of the show, Best Gift Ever, Rainbow Road Trip, and the 2017 movie, and he returned a 2 megabyte spreadsheet with 43,000 lines of dialogue over 84 hours of My Little Pony content. Ranking characters like this is the easy way because it's really straightforward to conceptualize in terms of characters who talk a lot, but it's also not a super interesting list. I don't have to tell you that Twilight Sparkle and her friends are positions 1 through 6, and if I gave you 10 minutes, you could probably name the next 30 positions easy. For the second list, I ranked characters based on how much of their time on screen is spent talking. So instead of a straight count of words spoken, I went looking for words spoken per second of screen time. This is maybe a more honest reflection of who is spending more of their time talking and tries to better balance the main cast against particularly chatty side characters. This list would absolutely not be possible without the help of My Little Pony and G.I. Joe fan Half the Battle, who in July of 2023 finally completed My Little Screentime, a nearly 3,000 row spreadsheet of the amount of screen time per episode of every named and unnamed character over the entirety of Generation 4. As long as you're not on mobile, I've linked the spreadsheet in the description of this video. You should definitely check it out, he did a fantastic job. The one downside of crunching words per second is that the resulting top 20, and especially the top 10, is a completely scattershot mix of characters that you either forgot existed or couldn't remember the names of, which is actually part of why I majored in math and economics in the first place. Some weird edge cases came up along the way, which I'll try to elaborate upon in the description of this video. Now let me show you some numbers. The first list is just a straightforward word count, and it's no surprise at all that Twilight Sparkle is number 1 with over 73,000 words. She's got that main character magic, she's voiced by one of the most seasoned voice actresses of the last 20 years, and her character appears in 86% of all episodes in the sample size. Pinkie Pie comes in a pretty distant second place, followed pretty closely by Rarity with 8% of the total word count each. I like to think of these two as the leaders in terms of quantity and quality. Pinkie Pie just by sheer volume of words, and why I decided she was going to be the thumbnail for this video before doing any of the research, and Rarity, whom I like to think was acted with such eloquence by Tabitha St. Germain that the writing team went a little out of their way to feature her in a few more episodes. But that may just be my fanboy talking. Rainbow Dash and Applejack are a tiny bit back with 7.5% apiece, a similarity which might have something to do with them sharing so much screen time together, or maybe just sharing a voice actor in Ashley Ball. I don't know, come to your own conclusions. And Fluttershy brings up the rear with almost 30,000 words, which is honestly expected for a hard word count like this. Altogether, the main 6 make up just over half of all dialogue, which makes sense, but is still kind of staggering for how much the human brain struggles with conceptualizing big numbers. But I will say that when you compare screen time against words spoken, the numbers for these 6 stay pretty consistent, with the only major difference being that Pinkie jumps from 5th most screen time to 2nd most words spoken. I don't have to tell you that girl is constantly talking, just all the time, so there's some anecdotal evidence for that stat. Spike is in 7th place as the next extra member of the main cast, who holds a pretty decent 10,000 word lead over 8th place Starlight Glimmer, mostly by virtue of having been there since the start of the series, even though Starlight is usually the focus of episodes where she appears and otherwise cuts down on unnecessary appearances. Applebloom, the chattiest member of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, takes 9th with over 17,000 words, and Discord sneaks right into the top 10 with a cool 12,000. Follow that with Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle in 11th and 12th place, and these 12 characters account for 70% of the entire dialogue, over 360,000 words between them. There's one interesting point to be made about Apple Bloom having almost 50% more lines than either Sweetie Belle or Scootaloo. In the back of my head, I always considered Apple Bloom the sort of de facto leader for the CMCs, and based on my community tab, a lot of people seem to get a similar vibe, even though they couldn't exactly place where those feelings were coming from. I thought I might finally have some kind of empirical evidence to back up that feeling until one commenter brought up the fact that a lot of Apple Bloom scenes aren't CMC scenes, but instead focus on the Apple family. Unlike Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, Apple Bloom comparatively spends a ton of time with her family, prepping for family reunions, fighting off capitalists, or any number of other shenanigans that don't necessarily involve her friends, and those extra hobbies and chores are just naturally going to put her over the top. From there, you have some of the more important secondary characters, starting with Princess Celestia and including some of the more eccentric, opinionated characters like Trixie and Granny Smith, before settling back down with the more chill Princess Luna, who doesn't quite have as much moonlight to address her subjects compared to her more outgoing sister. In fact, you don't see the first main villain on this list until number 17, and I can't decide if I'm surprised by this.
Oh, I do. You just aren't the pony I had in mind.
I think it makes sense that the chattiest member of the Unholy Trilogy is the only backdoor villain the show ever tried, especially since Chrysalis and Lord T-Rex tend to talk with their actions more than their words, given the obvious size and menace difference. These 17 characters combined put us over 75% of all dialogue spoken, and from here on out, every additional character contributes less than 1% of the total word count. I won't go through the entire list, but there's some interesting finds here, including Quibblepants talking more in 2 episodes than Big Mac did the entire series. Big Mac making the top 25 at all. Smolder being the chattiest member of the Young Six, and it's not even close. 4 more members of the Young Six sneaking their way between Flim and Flam. Silver Spoon getting less dialogue than Sans Smirk. Chancellor Nace almost getting out-talked by Spike's fake dad. Snails making the top 100 at all. And Angel Bunny technically sneaking into the top 100 by way of Freaky Friday. For the dialogue and She Talks to Angel, I attributed any lines spoken by Andrea Libman post-body swap as having come from Angel. I mean, yes, they came out of Fluttershy's mouth, but they came out of Angel's brain. It's a really weird edge case, and I wouldn't blame you for fighting me in the comments on a technicality, but that's what I went with. Speaking of weird technicalities, I counted Princess Luna and Nightmare Moon as 2 separate entities on this list. 3 out of 4 of my viewers count Nightmare Moon as a separate person, and I could see how you could split it either way, but even if I counted them together, adding their stats up isn't even enough to get her to budge over Granny Smith at number 15. For now though, here's a rounded out list of the top 50. For the sake of thoroughness, I also made a second list that tries to account for screen time by calculating words per second, and look, math is weird, and if you don't qualify your data, you get some really weird results. When I started crunching the numbers, I made a somewhat arbitrary rule that I was only counting characters with at least 100 words of dialogue, and I'll show you why. Here's a clip from Ponyville Confidential.
Literally!
The full free press is usually just boring news and stuff.
So funny!
This kid, nicknamed Green Days in the screen time list, shows up for 3 seconds, gets off 11 words, and then you never see him again. That's almost 4 words a second, which blows the number 1 spot on this list completely out of the water. You'll also notice that none of the main 6 even crack the top 50, and I think that's because they're such important characters. When you're a member of a group, especially an important one like the main 6, you naturally have to wait your turn to speak, and that results in a lot of time spent standing around listening to your friends, which I think dragged a lot of their averages down. Even with that rule in place, the top 20 gabbers per screen time in this list is all over the place, and I couldn't be happier to have data to support these weird random people. Like Dr. Horse, the doc who had to deal with Rainbow Dash while she learned how to read in season 2. Some of this list makes sense, like Quibblepants, but then you go right back to one-off weirdos like Sludge, whose name I had to Google to remind myself, but at least he got an entire mediocre song to justify the extra dialogue. From there, you're back to common sense picks like Zephyr Breeze, who just generally takes every second he's on screen to make the the situation about himself, and Grogar, who takes after his character creator Discord. Speaking of which, Grogar was counted separate from Discord almost solely because the Screentime spreadsheet counted them as separate characters. This is similar to the Princess Luna situation, though I'm personally of the opinion that Discord's turn as Grogar was more of a shape-shifting trickery than Grogar being an entirely separate character, and because he has a history with earlier MLP, but that's a topic for later. But in the interest of fairness, if you lump him together with Discord, Grogar falls all the way out of the top 30, and Gabby the Griffin moves up from 21 into the top 20. My apologies to Gabby Griffin fans. But now we're back into some more really weird picks. Alice the Future Sight Deer from Best Gift Ever, the guy that swindled Pinky's party cannon, Stephen Magnet. If there's one thing that this top 20 seems to have in common, it's a sense of eloquence, where even if you hate the character, you still admire the character and the VA's ability to spin a yarn. And nowhere is that more apparent than with number 11, Iron Will. Iron Will is literally center stage from the moment we meet him, and his second appearance brings up another factor you'll see a lot of on the words per second list. For a lot of the Season 7 Zeppelin ride, Iron Will is this omnipresent voice over the speaker system, which means that he's getting his word count up without actually appearing on screen. This is a great way for characters like these to jam themselves into situations where they don't belong, but it's almost always to service the plot. It's when we get into the top 10 that some of these results start getting really interesting. For example, the number 10 spot goes to Claude, the ornery traveling stage pony for whom Rarity makes a puppet theater in the criminally underrated Inspiration Manifestation, and I don't blame you one bit for forgetting about him. I mean, his name doesn't even show up until the end credits. Number 9 is Mayor Sunny Skies, the cute little dude from the 2019 special Rainbow Road Trip. I was shocked to see him on here, especially for such an unassuming good boy, but there's another min-max strategy at play to explain how he got this high up. Anytime you give an entire song, especially a narrative-driven flashback song, to a tertiary character you don't see outside this episode, see Sludge from earlier, that's a great way to rack up words while not exactly being the focus of the scene. I'm anticipating some subset of people that watch this video being of the opinion that song lyrics shouldn't count towards a character's total word count, and my argument against that is twofold. I don't think that cutting song lyrics from the word count would make all that much of an appreciable difference, and I'm also of the opinion that a vast majority of songs in the series are story-driven, character-driven, or some combination of the two, and that the practice of writing truly unnecessary fluff songs died in Season 1 with Pinky's off-the-cuff party jams. The end of the Rainbow is 3 minutes long, and one of the songs that made me realize that this show had one of the greatest songwriting teams of all time, but it's also a necessary story-driven song that catches the gang up on the state of the town and helps us sympathize with the primary guest character of the special. He's just such an unassuming dude, I was pretty surprised to see him this high. Number 8 goes to First Folio, another one-episode pony that shows up for 2 scenes in the Season 9 episode The Point of No Return. She's a very matter-of-fact speaker with a quaint faux Midwestern affect that still gets quickly to the point.
Yeah.
But because this is a story about Twilight with a really effective sense of urgency, we don't get any more screen time with First Folio than is absolutely necessary. The same goes for Cherry Jubilee, who appeared in 2 speaking roles over the course of the series. It's notable that both times we run into her, the ponies are too focused on an urgent matter like rounding up AJ or making it to Yakistan for Cherry to eat up unnecessary screen time. Number 6 goes to Gladmane, the Elvis incarnate running Las Pegasus and quite possibly my all-time favorite one-time villain. Gladmane is the owner of the gaming empire that is Las Pegasus, and it's his smooth integration into nearly every scene, his omnipresent loudspeaker a la Iron Will, and his penchant for long, eloquent monologues that vault him into the top 10 here. Prim Hemline at number 5 is an even more impressive version of Cherry Jubilee, who despite a single appearance manages to command almost 2 words a second as she thrashes Rarity for being late to Fashion Week rehearsal and Rarity Takes Manhattan. She's a no-nonsense PM with a short fuse, coupled with the writing team's instinct to leave her out of focus for most of the runtime so Rarity can learn how to address her own morals in what turned out to be a really good episode. Number 4 goes to the pest control pony from Bloom and Gloom, and at this point it seems almost sacrilegious to have a character in the top 5 who really only appears in a dream sequence. Nicknamed Egon in the screen time sheet, this guy's entire shtick is explaining the ins and outs of gassing swarms of Twitter mites while Apple Bloom has a borderline uncomfortable existential crisis in the background. He has 10 lines in his entire appearance before piecing out to a retirement home never to be seen again. But if it feels weird seeing one-off hallucinations showing up on a list of biggest talkers, I think we're all entitled to one gimme.
Oh, a joy to talk with another creature. It's been so long. You must tell me everything about you. There's so much to say, so much to do. Oh, look.
Autumn Blaze is the first Kieran we're properly introduced to in Sounds of Silence, a surprise MVP of Season 8 that sees her as the last non-mute member of an ancient race of creature called the Kieran, who wears their emotion on their tattered, singed sleeves. Autumn Blaze is on screen for 8 minutes in her only episode and still manages to squeeze out over 1,000 words as the only speaking member of her village. Autumn Blaze would absolutely be number 1 on this list if it weren't for 2 particularly obvious edge cases that found a way to minimax around the model I used for this video. In both of the major Las Pegasus episodes, the Vegas-style atmosphere is held together by audio as well as visual set dressing. Machines going off, the soft murmur of the crowd, and those pain-in-the-ass commissioners trying to sell you on their residence shows while you're there.
Your only regret will be that you didn't see it sooner!
This guy, named in the credits as Barker or Carnival Barker, shows up in both Viva Las Pegasus and Granny's Gone Wild, hyping up casino-sanctioned events in standard showman fashion. As a result, he gets off 2.25 words per second of screen time, despite being on screen for less than 90 seconds. The number 1 character who spends the largest percentage of his screen time talking is voiced by Jay Brazo, and I know what you're thinking. This guy? A 50-year veteran character actor of film and television, perhaps best known by American audiences as the referee from Air Bud and a half-dozen other animal sports movies? That guy? I spent the better part of an afternoon looking through what is actually a rather impressive resume, but the entry I want to focus on is a bit part from a 2017 episode of Friendship is Magic. In Daring Done, Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie travel to Somnambula to explain the mythos of Daring Do to the village trying to cancel her. While trying to smooth things over, Dash makes a sour comment about the destroyed statue of the town's namesake and gets immediately interrupted by a villager, listed only as Elder Stallion in the credits.
This was not some crummy old statue. It was the namesake of our town. If you want to understand us, you must first understand her.
This would be a bog standard slap on the wrist, except that the Elder runs right into a 3-minute monologue about the legend of Somnambula, and the entire market scene evaporates into this really cool art-shifted monologue about the town's namesake. I adore this scene, delivered with a dry reverence by Jay over a really cool montage styled after ancient hieroglyphics. The takeaway here is that throughout the entire montage, the Elder never stops talking. This guy has almost 400 words in the entire series, and 80% of them take place over this really stylish sequence. He's not even a removed, faceless narrator that I can remove from the dataset. He's just some guy that really cares about his town and wanted to share it with people. And honestly, I respect the hell out of that.
Is the show over?
Thanks a lot for watching. I'm hoping this wasn't too dry, but I genuinely love math and statistics, and it's not super often that I get to do this kind of research with my favorite pony show. Another huge shout out to Chris, aka Half the Battle, for creating that monster screen time spreadsheet. He's the inspiration for this video, and I've wanted to do this for almost a year since I found his awesome contribution to the fandom. I urge you to go check it out for yourself. I've linked to it in the description of this video. Just beware, it will crash your phone if you try to open it on mobile. Until next time, I'm some horse on the internet. Thanks for watching.